Welcome, everyone, to Seeking Refuge, Dislocation, and Resettlement. This is an initiative of the Afghan and Ukraine Refugee Task Force of the Diocese of New Jersey. Tonight, we will have presentations from three panel speakers. Kendall Martin from Episcopal Migration Ministries, Seth Caperdale from Interfaith Rise, and Pierre, Haitian Ministry out of St. Elizabeth's. I want to begin, though. We received a statement from UNHCR, and I'd like to invite the Very Reverend Caroline Carson to share that statement with us.
Hey, everybody. This is a statement from Matt Reynolds, who's the regional representative for the U.S. and Caribbean at the UNHCR, which is the UN Refugee Agency, for our World Refugee Day event that we're having tonight to prep us for tomorrow. He writes, on World Refugee Day, we honor the courage, strength, and contributions of the millions of people around the world who have been forced to flee their homes due to violence, war, or persecution. It's a day to remember that with help from welcoming communities and neighbors, people can rebuild their lives and their networks and even thrive. It's also a day to remind ourselves that there is much more to do. This World Refugee Day, we commend the efforts of the Episcopal Diocese of New Jersey, your clergy, congregations, and staff to welcome those forced to flee within our communities. This organization has shown that you stand with refugees and that you are committed to advocating and being a voice for those most vulnerable in our society. We all share the responsibility to protect people seeking safety and ensure all human beings are treated with dignity and respect. Everyone has the right to asylum, whoever they are, wherever they come from, whenever they need it.
Thank you so much. This panel has come out of a realization that the refugee crisis around the globe is continuing to grow. So we wanted to get together some people who are engaged in this work actively, especially here on the East Coast of the United States. We've asked for resources, and there is now a link in the chat, and it will be posted on the Share Your Story on the diocese website soon. That refugee, it's tinyearl.com refugee packet, has resources from some of the organizations present, as well as liturgical resources. The statement that Reverend Caroline just read as well. So I invite you and encourage you to check that out. The way this is going to flow tonight is each panelist is going to give us a presentation around 12 minutes or so. And so we have three presentations. Afterwards, we'll go through a little bit of the resources, including other people who might be involved and present with us who do refugee work. And then there will be a time for questions and answers. If anybody watching has any questions at any time, feel free to put them in the chat and we will take note and bring them up at the appropriate time. So to begin with, I'd like to welcome Kendall Martin from Episcopal Migration Ministries for being with us tonight. And Kendall, can you share about the work of Episcopal Migration Ministries?
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm going to share my screen. I've got a brief presentation. So it's so nice to be here. I'm Kendall Martin. I'm the Senior Communications Manager for Episcopal Migration Ministries, also known as EMM. And EMM is the Episcopal Church's Refugee and Migration Ministry, and it resides within the Mission Beyond Department of the Episcopal Church. So the Episcopal Church has been engaged in this work, serving immigrants since the late 1800s, when the church first opened port chaplaincies to serve sojourners on both coasts. And then in the 1930s, local Episcopal congregations collected donations to provide steamship passage for those fleeing Nazi Europe. And through the mid and late 20th century, we partnered with other faith organizations to resettle those who were oppressed by the Iron Curtain and the genocide of Southeast Asia. And then in the 1980s, Episcopal Migration Ministries was formally established and in partnership with a network of affiliate agencies, dioceses, churches, and volunteers, is today one of only 9 national refugee resettlement agencies through which all refugees enter the United States. And to date, EMM has resettled over 100,000 refugees. So EMM's core areas of work include refugee resettlement, a program that is a public-private partnership between the US government and the Episcopal Church; Neighbor to Neighbor, which is a program that connects congregations and groups with asylum seekers and recently arrived Afghans for co-sponsorship; and then our work in education and advocacy, which includes outreach, educational materials, and advocacy in coordination with the Episcopal Church's Office of Government Relations. And I'll go over these 3 key areas of our work with ways that you can access our resources, get more involved, and then support this ministry of the church. So like I said, EMM is one of 9 national refugee resettlement agencies that holds a contract with the US Department of State and the US Department of Health and Human Services to welcome refugees and provide services to refugees for their first months in the United States. And refugee status is a form of protection that may be granted to people who meet the definition of refugee and who are of special humanitarian concern to the United States. So a refugee is defined as someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership, or a particular social group or political opinion. And the United Nations Refugee Agency is charged with finding solutions for refugees. So the first goal is always that refugees can voluntarily go home when it's safe to do so. The second durable solution is local integration into the country in which they first sought asylum. And then the third durable solution, which is only available for less than 0.5% of refugees who are eligible, is resettlement to a third country. So for refugees who are resettled to the US, there's a multi-month and sometimes many-year process of security screening, health screening, and approvals before they travel to the US. And so for perspective, there are currently over 21.3 million individuals who have refugee status under UNHCR's mandate. However, as of the end of 2021, there are a record 89.3 million people worldwide who've been forcibly displaced from their homes. So once refugees arrive to the United States, they're greeted by a local affiliate of one of the 9 national refugee resettlement agencies like EMM. And EMM currently has 11 affiliates, which you can see on your screen, around the country. And each agency's local affiliates, they carry out the programs with their local staff, as well as with countless volunteers and community partners, stakeholders, congregations, and other supporters. And the 3 primary federal programs that support refugees upon their arrival to their first months in the US, programs that EMM carries out with our federal funders and through our local affiliates, are reception and placement, matching grant, and preferred communities. And each of these programs' goals is defined a bit differently, but all are focused on assisting the refugee family as they achieve self-sufficiency. So through all of our programs, EMM is focused on the long-term integration of our clients, which we know is further supported through the engagement of a welcoming community and welcoming neighbors. And we very much believe that refugee resettlement and integration are true community building work. So while EMM does receive federal funding to support individuals with refugee status who are coming here through the resettlement program, we do not receive funding to support other displaced populations. So as the church, we care about individuals who are fleeing but don't have that protection nor receive that government support. And we've been building out ways to serve those populations. So the second area of our work that I want to share is our newest program, which is Neighbor to Neighbor. And this program is entirely funded by grants that we have pursued to make this happen. And this program trains, it provides support, and it provides matching to faith communities and groups who wish to be community sponsors to asylum seekers or Afghans. And unlike refugees who apply for that protection from outside the US, asylees are individuals who meet the international definition of refugee, but they've applied for protection from inside the country or at a port of entry. And when individuals have applied, but they haven't yet received their asylum and they're physically present in the US. They need the same kinds of support and services as refugees, but they're not eligible. So this is where Neighbor to Neighbor comes in. Groups come together, they discern a call to their ministry, they raise the necessary funds to provide housing and support, and then they walk alongside their new neighbors and help them integrate into their new communities. And the Afghans that EMM has been assisting through Neighbor to Neighbor, they received humanitarian parole through Operation Afghan Allies Welcome. And that humanitarian parole is granted based on an urgent humanitarian need, but that parole is not a pathway to lawful permanent residence in the US, nor does it grant immigration status. So under the Operation Allies parole program, Afghans are granted protection from deportation for 2 years, and they are eligible to apply for work authorization. And once parolees were first taken to the US military bases, they were then transferred to resettlement agencies to provide this support. And the resettlement agencies that have been supplying the resettlement programs for the arriving Afghans have done that largely through private donations, volunteers, and stretching already very thin resources. And the next part of EMM's work is the engagement unit of EMM. And the engagement unit of EMM is myself, and then my colleague who is the senior manager for church relations and engagement. And our work is focused on providing educational resources, opportunities, and next steps for individuals who are either interested in migration ministry or already engaged some way. EMM hosts webinars, we produce curricula and book discussion guides, we send weekly news digest and newsletters, and we also have a podcast called Hometown. And in addition, we convene a virtual monthly Episcopal Asylum and Detention Ministry Network. And when we come together, we share about the individual ministries that folks are engaged in. We've been creating resources together, we pray, and then we find ways to sort of use that collective energy to support refugees and immigrants in our communities. So in terms of how to get involved with the work that EMM is doing, there's sort of 4 key areas that we point people to. Obviously, the first is about learning and sharing that knowledge. And on the EMM website, we have fact sheets and explainers. We have recordings from all of our webinars. We give advocacy updates, and all of those resources are free. And then the next is that you can advocate. So EMM works really closely with the Office of Government Relations for the Episcopal Church and the work that they do through the Episcopal Public Policy Network. And they're the ones who come up with action alerts when we need to reach out to members of Congress. They help us arrange meetings with Congress to advocate on behalf of refugees and asylum seekers. And they have a grassroots network that you can join that helps make it really easy for you to directly contact your member of Congress. And then in terms of serving, we have many opportunities for people to get involved in migration ministry with EMM. We always tell people to look for your closest local affiliate and find ways to volunteer and get engaged and donate with them first and foremost. But if you have a group of individuals or congregation who's interested in providing more support in terms of co-sponsorship, we definitely want you to fill out an initial interest form about Neighbor to Neighbor and learn more about how to get engaged with that. And then we've got the Episcopal Asylum and Ministry Network meetings, which anyone is welcome to join at any time. This is for people who are actively engaged, and it's also for people who want to be engaged or just want to learn more, but it's really an excellent resource for connecting with other people who are doing this work. And then lastly, is about offering donations to the work of Episcopal Migration Ministries and the work of the Neighbor to Neighbor program, and all of the opportunities that we're trying to create for folks out of getting grants and having conversations with individuals who really want to support this work. And I'd like to lift up as well World Refugee Day, that's tomorrow. On EMM's website, we do have a page, World Refugee Day 2022, and we've released an advocacy toolkit and some additional resources if you'd like to check those out. It also includes opportunities that are happening both from advocacy as well as education around the country. And then you can find EMM on social media at EMM Refugees. We also have a Vimeo page where we post videos, and that's vimeo.com/EMM Refugees. And I'm always available to answer questions or make connections with the right people. And then the Reverend Chris McNabb, who is our program manager for Neighbor to Neighbor, is always available to answer questions with regard to that aspect of our work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kendall. So a question for you, since we're still in your time slot. It definitely feels like we keep having international crisis after crisis, and that the number of refugees at least feels like it's growing. Can you give us some perspective on that, especially through the eyes of EMM?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, what we're seeing right now, obviously, is the largest displacement in recorded history. And what we're seeing is a lot of individuals in the migration work trying to make sure that the presidential termination for refugees is increased. So there are a lot of people who are advocating for 200,000 individuals to come in to try to meet that need. But where EMM sits is that, to date, the U.S. has only admitted a little over 8,000 refugees, which is incredibly low. And part of that is that we had to really pivot when the crisis in Afghanistan happened, and we needed to figure out ways that we could serve the needs of those individuals. So that's where a lot of our resources and time went. And of course, we started getting back into the flow, and then what has happened in Ukraine. And what we know within this field is that those crises are just going to continue to happen, and it's going to happen back after back. But we also have to always be really mindful of how many millions of people there are that are displaced, and how many people have been in refugee camps for 10, 15, 20 years waiting to be resettled. And so our eye is always on the mission of our work and the fact that those people are waiting to be helped. And so we can be really reactive to every crisis that's happening, that will continue to happen. But at the end of the day, we're just focused on running, the most solid program that we can within the affiliate network that we have, and serving as many people as we can. We are certainly, like all other national agencies, trying to open new sites. We want to be able to build back the capacity that we lost. After the last election, we went from 30 sites and we are now down to 11. So our network has diminished rapidly, much like all of the agencies. And now we're trying to build that back so that we can serve more people and meet a higher resettlement number.
What would you say is the largest struggle you guys face? Is it being down to 11? What would it be?
I think that for EMM, our largest struggle is funding and resources. So one of the interesting things about EMM compared to the other national agencies is that because we are a ministry of the Episcopal Church, we were not allowed to fundraise until 2017. So unlike other national agencies who have years of cultivating a donor base and building up those resources, we had to react, and then we got approval in 2017 and then try to ramp that up. And so as the networks were getting diminished, the funding also gets diminished. So the majority of my work and my colleagues' work is all from fundraising. And our Neighbor to Neighbor program, anything that we want to do.
Excuse me, Kendall, in the chat, are you saying that the number went from 30 down to 11 after the 2016?
Yes, that's correct. In response to just the absolute, I would say destruction of the resettlement program that happened. That was a response that we all lived into. And so now we're all really trying to build that back up, increase our capacity, and find new and innovative ways to do it. And part of that is doing it through co-sponsorship. So getting community members to come together and to provide those same supports that we're not able to because we don't have that bandwidth. We don't have the resources.
Thank you so much for sharing. I hope you can stick around for a little bit in case we have some questions at the end. Excellent.
Certainly.
Okay, next I'd like to invite to share with us and to welcome to this panel Seth Caperdale from Interfaith Rise. Seth, can you share with us about the work you are doing?
Sure. Thanks so much for hosting this, and it's an honor. And some of the faces on this call are faces that I've seen in the work this year in New Jersey. My name is Seth Caperdale. I'm a pastor at the Reformed Church of Highland Park, and actually Reverend Chris McNabb, who's listed on the slide, was one of my favorite interns of all time.
He's one of my favorites too.
Yeah. So he was here for a number of years and actually cut his teeth on visiting the Elizabeth Detention Center every week for a couple of years while as an intern. But my organization started like this in 2015. Kids choir in our church. My wife and I have been here since 2001. The kids choir sang the song, "I Want Jesus to Walk With Me." And they had watched with their choir teacher a video of Syrian refugee kids in a Lebanese camp. And then they had sort of taken the line that was most poignant to them. And they, between each verse, read these lines of what they'd heard from kids on this documentary. And I was so moved by what they shared in church that day. I walked out and I said, we have to start a refugee resettlement program. If the kids in the church are this aware of the suffering of people and the movement of people who move because of war, we have to wake up and get more involved. So that led to Interfaith Rise being formed. We started as sort of a partner to partner or neighbor to neighbor kind of group, I would say. And within 1 year, we had done a dog and pony show for USCRI, one of the 9 affiliates down in Washington, and said, hey, why don't you start a chapter in New Jersey and do it here? And they agreed to take us on as an affiliate. So we are an affiliate partner of the U.S. Committee on Refugees and Immigrants, which is one of the larger of the 9 organizations. It is 14 affiliates, or 14 of its own sites, and then something like 30 partners like us around the country. We started small. The first year we resettled refugees. There were about 50 refugees that year. This year we will resettle over 400, and that's 250 plus Afghans and close to 150 refugees and special immigrant visa holders, which is a refugee type of status related to those who served in Afghanistan and Iraq. That has meant a dramatic increase in the size of our staffing. But really the thing that makes Interfaith Rise work is the commitment from the interfaith community. Over the years, we've averaged between 50 and 60 congregations a year who meet on a monthly basis for a Thursday in-person meeting in Highland Park with representatives who work together to hear who's coming in the next month and to offer how they can help, whether that's to come and set up an apartment, to clean an apartment, to collect the furniture for a particular apartment. And we were doing quite well with that up until October 1st, when of this past year, when the Afghan situation unfolded, and we had to grow our agency about 7, 8 times larger than it's ever been overnight. And we had to sort of rethink everything. It was sort of terrifying. We lost some staff in the process of it was no longer a mom and pop shop. It was like Walmart in 2 seconds. And we had to figure out how to do a personalized job on a whole different level immediately, and deal with going from hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to many millions of dollars a year, and all of the dynamics around that. This is really, really hard work. The housing market was particularly difficult because we had just had a hurricane that had devastated the rental market in central New Jersey in August. So a lot of people were scrambling for the only available apartments. And then suddenly we had to rent 85 apartments. And we did it. We managed to do it. Part of the way we did it was by opening an office in South Jersey. Some of the people on this call have come into our Interfaith Rise life because we now have an office in Vineland, New Jersey as well. So Highland Park, New Jersey, which is in the New Brunswick area, and Vineland, New Jersey are the 2 sites. We have 8 full-time staff heading toward 10 in the Vineland office, and about 40 full-time staff in the central New Jersey office. And it includes a total of about 10 caseworkers, who are dealing directly with new arrivals, and then an employment team, an English language learning team, a refugee school impact team, a mental health and other health team, and a preferred communities team, which is like intensive case management. It was mentioned earlier. All of these things very similar to what Kendall said. It's about self-sufficiency. It's about empowerment, and it's about a warm welcome. One of the realities that I try to help congregations think about is we're called reception and placement. That's one of the main programs. We're not called resettlement, actually. And it's a good reminder, especially for churches, as you get involved in people's lives. You're meeting people who've been on a journey at a moment in their journey. It may be the last moment. They may put down roots where you are, but I bet there's at least a 75% chance they won't, because folks will come to wherever they have an opportunity. And then they'll learn that there's a large Congolese community in Kentucky, and there's a large Afghan community in Sacramento. And even though there's a million reasons why each one of us might think our community is the best place to, carve out the rest of your life, especially once we get to know your really cute kids and are invested in their lives, that may not be. So the types of prayers that we pray for our church kids when they go off to college, or interns when they're with us for a time and then move on, are the types of prayers we find ourselves praying for refugee families who we've given our hearts and souls to, because often they're here for a time and then they move on. One of the unique commitments, or one of the unique things that Interfaith Rise has, I have a housing corporation, and it's called the Reformed Church of Highland Park Affordable Housing Corporation, and the entire Interfaith Rise sits under the housing corporation. And that gives us a very unique angle on housing. So I find that we have far less struggles than most people that I speak to in the refugee resettlement world with housing. And that's because we rent all of the units for everybody. And every landlord who's nervous about renting to somebody with no pay stubs, no English language, no job, and who thinks they may move in 3 months is not worried about renting to us. We always rent for a year. We always pay every penny of a security deposit, so that when somebody does move, as they often do, we can turn around and give that house to the next family that's coming in. And we can balance things in such a way to not be sitting with tons of empty units, but rather it means that we never really need to use hotels. And this really was a huge benefit to the dramatic increase in numbers of the last few months. Folks could right away begin working on school and employment and the things that you can't really work on when you're in a hotel and you don't know which zip code you're actually going to end up in. So that's something unique to the way we look at things. I wanted to make a comment in connection with what Kendall shared. When we started our organization, my assumption was every refugee that came in through Interfaith Rise would be stamped as a refugee before they came to these shores. And I have a separate organization called DIRE, Deportation and Immigration Response Equipo, which was set up to protect neighbors from draconian policies of deportation, but also is utilized to serve asylum seekers, or those who don't have the permanent statuses or the ability to easily adjust so for a path to citizenship. But what has happened in the last few months is that even though the Biden administration is even lower than the Trump administration on arrivals, in the time that we've had the 8,000, or I think my number is more like 11 and up to date, it's somewhere very, very low. There have been 400,000 arrivals who are coming without status. And the same organizations that are tasked with meeting the needs of 125,000, which was the goal for the stamped offshore refugee program, the same organizations are being tasked with helping these. So that's 76,000 Afghans. That's 100,000 Ukrainians. That's 50,000 Cubans who've arrived in the last 3 months, in the biggest crisis in Cuba since 1980 in terms of rapid exodus from the island. It's somewhere between 50 and 60,000 Haitians, and it's 100,000 unaccompanied minors. So there's over 400,000 people who need not only housing and some way towards self-sufficiency, but who currently don't have the ability to get easily a work permit, many of those populations, or don't have the ability to adjust to the kind of status that make it easy for them to access the types of benefits they need. And we're sorely underdeveloped in terms of meeting the immigration legal needs that are out there for the 400,000 people. So all of those 400,000 that this year need a lawyer in order to not find themselves in deportation proceedings or find themselves living in the shadows. And unfortunately, many of the populations who have the least ability to adjust are some of the people with the darkest skin among our populations of the world. And that really risks us once again behaving in such a way that certain populations are driven into a level of poverty that leads to further exacerbation of stereotypes that exist in the world today. So in the Haitian communities that we serve, who are an eligible population to receive ORR benefits, they don't get matching grant because they are not going to have work permits. So you can't offer them anything that will help them feed themselves and become self-sufficient. So we are frequently serving Haitian families where there's 3 or 4 families jammed into a house, and we're trying to provide them, some access to TANF benefits and other things, feeling sick about the fact that if that family was from Afghanistan or Ukraine, we would be having a very different conversation about resources, at least Afghanistan. We're not yet sure about Ukraine. The Ukrainian thing's even more complicated. But those are just realities that being in this day to day exposed to us about the multi-layers of injustice and justice that are all tied up in this web. I think that that refugee resettlement organizations like EMM and like USCRI and its affiliates are really some of the places where if government wanted to have new policies and insights that are guided by the people, you should really be listening, because you can't get much more on the ground than what this is all about. It's day in and day out in people's homes and in people's lives, seeing where there are opportunities for blossoming and where the flowers just keep getting cut off the stem. I think that in a lot of ways, the advocacy potential of churches who are listening to the refugee resettlement communities that are connected so often to faith communities such as EMM, it really is one of the most important things that churches can offer, because we can take an every family approach, and we always should. Every family matters, but we also, if we're ever going to change the direction of this, so that we when I started this, there were 60 million displaced people in the world. The article that I read this week shows 100 million, 40 million since 2016 have an increase. And that's, the last 10 million of that almost is related to the current war in Ukraine. So it's just, that's not just displaced across international borders, that's internally displaced people as well. But it's just not going in the right direction. And we've got to, as people of faith, be looking at the big questions as well as setting up every single house for the next arriving individual. I think I'll stop there. Well, I'll say one more thing. In the slower moment of the Trump administration, one of the beauties of that moment for us is that we got a little creative and started trying to think beyond the expectations of the reception and placement program. Either we were going to shrink our staff or we were going to find other things to do. So we started a number of ventures, and now we have a Global Grace Cafe, which is an every day a week cafe where there's a chef each day from a different country in the world who's paid $100 to put forth beauty from their country. And we have a Global Grace Marketplace, which is like a fair trade store, but we emphasize purchasing from the countries that we're serving currently. And we talk to individuals about, who's making earrings out of bombshells in Iraq and that kind of thing, so that we're making personal contacts with women-owned cooperatives. Then we started Global Grace Farm, and it is both a farm that provides fresh vegetables for the cafe, but also that all around the edges of the farm has individual plots for refugee families that want to have a plot or two families together, so that relationships that happen while working on the farm. And just now we started Global Grace Recycled Wood Products, where some local business owner who just sold his pallet business, but has an endless supply of pallets, is helping us build furniture and household items out of old pallets, and finding ways. This just started a month ago, to incorporate some of the artistry and excellence from Afghan artisans in particular into the products that are going to be built. And that's like a way to raise funds for the programming, but really it's a way to create beauty. And I think, when we think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think beauty really should be right at the top. It's almost as important as food, to be able to experience the fullness of life and to have moments where you're not only thinking about survival. So that's one nice thing about churches and about communities, is that we cherish things like that. And it's one thing I think we can really ask of each other is, how do we give opportunities for beauty, and how do we celebrate them when we see them?
Your ministry is incredibly broad, and truly, it's clear it blesses many people. I was wondering if, and this is going to be a large question, but I think it would be helpful if we could get an example of what reception and placement looks like for a family or for individuals. Can you give us broad strokes of that process?
Yeah. So some of this would be like what it looked like before last October, when it seems like all systems ended, but I'll just kind of share it. Generally, a few weeks before a family arrives, we're asked, or we're told, hey, there's a family that we want to send, and this is USCRI. There's a weekly meeting of all the 9 agencies in Washington. They sit around a table. They talk about every family that has been cleared for travel. They divvy them out around the 9 agencies. Then the 9 agencies divvy them out around their affiliates. And they think about things like, is there a family tie related to anybody who's coming? Are there other folks from the same linguistic group? They do whatever they do. And has that agency had enough refugees to kind of keep them busy? We're asked, can you take this family of 7 that's traveling from the Democratic Republic of Congo? If we assure the case, then usually we have about 3 weeks before that family arrives, or longer. And their delays because of COVID and other things has made it that sometimes we'll assure somebody and it'll be 6 months before we hear that name again. That's frustrating, but when it works well, it's maybe 3 weeks. We begin to identify a house that we think we can rent for that family. We delay as long as we can, so that we're not renting a house and then sitting and paying for an empty house for a really long time. That's a dance. We're getting better at it. We rent a house. We have a huge warehouse now with untold amounts of almost everything needed, but some combination of stuff out of the warehouse plus an ask that goes out widely to the Interfaith Rise community helps us get the items we need to get that house set up. We do have some paid staff that help with setup, but a lot of the setup is by volunteers, and we fully furnish that house so that everything that one needs, like beds, tables, chairs, everything you need for the kitchen, for the bathroom, everything is there. And we tend to also try for bicycles and computers and some other things as well, but sometimes we wait on some of that. The house is totally set up. The cabinet is stocked with non-perishables. The refrigerator's full of what's needed. We ask relevant families who know what people eat from that part of the world to give us a grocery list. Some volunteer goes and gets everything. House is all set. We go to the Newark airport and wait for a bus from JFK to drive the family from JFK to Newark. Newark's only 35 minutes up the road. We're really lucky. That's how the transportation works here. Usually the flights are in the middle of the night. They're a little cheaper, or for whatever reason, it seems the whole world arrives at night. And we have volunteers who meet the family. We have a person who can speak the first language in the vehicle as well. Sometimes that is the driver. Sometimes it's a driver plus that person. They bring them to the home. They get them set up in the home. And they say, we'll have somebody come within 24 hours to see you. But we also just make sure they're not going to burn the house down. They understand how the gas works and the stove and things like that. And then we leave them to rest. And that's what it looks like at the beginning. Within 24 hours, our case manager comes and begins walking through the sort of essential first things. Over time, we've learned not to try to do everything on that first day. You're overwhelmed. You're in a new place. You don't need to be thinking about everything. But there's fairly intensive case management services by our R&P case manager for the first week, and then that stays pretty strong through 90 days. Our goal is, as an agency, by the time we hit 90 days, that our case manager can walk away and I can say to the case manager, who is the intentional, compassionate community for this family? And they can answer me. And we have determined, okay, there's a fifth grader and we've got some community member who's got a fifth grade kid and who's helping make connections. It doesn't always work out that smoothly, but that is the goal, is that we have a group of intentional friends in the community that are wrapped around each family that we set up. We have the benefit of having folks in 9 counties, 21 school districts. That might not sound like a benefit, but it's a benefit in so many ways. One is it means that volunteers aren't working with 400 people. They're working with the 2 or 3 families in their community. It means schools are working with a handful of families, not a ton of families. It means that the housing market is not completely strained in any one particular place. So some of the ways that we make up for the spread around nature now is by really utilizing technology to create lots of opportunities for Afghans to come together, for classes and such that bring them together online, and build bridges in that way. And also through employment, we have got some really big employers that are easily accessible to people from multi-counties, and that gives the bridge building as well. So, yeah.
What is the best way someone who's interested in any part of your vast ministry can get connected?
Go to interfaithrise.org and sign up as a volunteer. You get on our newsletter list and can begin seeing what the opportunities are. Usually the 3rd Thursday of every month is our meeting. During COVID, we've messed around with Zoom only, hybrid. We still haven't perfected that. I prefer in person, but I know that there's ways in which the Zoom reality has deepened our bench, and I don't want to lose that. So sometimes I do one full one in person and then repeat it. So it happens that this month, next Thursday, is our next community meeting. So if you sign up this week, you can find out what the Zoom link is and join us. The big thrust of this Thursday's meeting is for us to deal with sharing how we plan on approaching the 93 Ukrainian families who have called us in the last 2 weeks and need services. And that is just the beginning. And maybe this will come up later, but the United for Ukraine program has allowed for 100,000 people to come here, which is wonderful. But unlike the Afghan program, where 76,000 were spread around 9 agencies and all their affiliates, these are 100,000 people coming to people they know. And Ukrainians aren't spread out. There's going to be 20,000 of those Ukrainians between Philadelphia and New York. So 1/5 of the entire population will be smack dab in Interfaith Rise country. And we are getting many, many calls a day. And some of the things that that the State Department, frankly, and Office of Refugee Resettlement are saying are just entirely unrealistic. The idea that housing is not to be part of this because sponsors are supposed to have signed up to do housing when really they didn't. It said they were to help secure housing in what they signed. And when you're we have 20,000 people coming to the metro area. Nobody here pays for an extra bedroom. Most of the people who are coming are, 5 people, 4 people coming to their brother who lives in a 2-bedroom apartment with his wife and 2 children already. You're going to either have incredibly angry landlords who've got 9, 10 people living in 2-bedroom units, or you're going to have to help new arrivals with housing. And right now, there's nothing clear about the funding that may or may not happen. But first indications are that they're saying, oh no, the families are supposed to take care of housing. It's not the reality of the calls that we're getting to our office. So.
Thank you for sharing all you are doing. Thank you for being with us tonight. And I hope you can stick around as well.
Thank you, Ryan.
Excellent. We now turn to Father Robin Pierre over at St. Elizabeth's Church. Father, are you there? I saw he seemed to log in. Okay. So I'm going to hope that Father Pierre can reconnect with us in a minute. He seemed to have logged out, and hopefully he's retrying his connection. While we are waiting for him, at this point, I want to reiterate that if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. If you want to raise your hand, if I can see you on the screen, we can go that way as well.
Marshall Shelley has raised his hand. Go ahead, Marshall. Oh.
It's all right. Hey, Seth. How you doing, brother? One of the things that I was in the room for, and I wanted to really highlight, because Trisha's with us from ECS, is can you give a little bit of color on that revolving fund on the housing effort you guys did? Because you really cracked a hard nut there, which is how do we get a landlord to accept a client or a tenant they would not normally take. This is I remember you and your finance guy set this up. This is a novel response. And I think it's key not only to refugee resettlement, but also dealing with some of our urban homelessness crises. So, if you could fill the space a little bit, I'd like that. And it was a truly innovative solution. That's why I don't want to lose it. You're muted.
I'm sorry, Marshall, were you asking me or Trisha?
I was doing it for Trisha
Okay.
as she's our executive director of Episcopal Community Services, and
Yeah.
as a result of that, she's the one sitting on money that could possibly be coordinated to a housing fund that could be set up like that. A completely vested interest in that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the key is the world. And I'm sorry, maybe we should wait and answer the question. I see Robin has come back on, or do you want me to answer the question first? Where did
I'd say you've started. Go ahead, and then we'll bring in Father Pierre.
Yeah, I think there is a tendency to go negative on landlords. In the progressive community, generally, folks are always kind of on the side of tenants and, anti-eviction, and all those things are right. Like, we need to be always concerned about people being evicted. However, until somebody comes up with a different solution for housing, man, we better be working with landlords, appreciative of landlords, trying to make life easy for landlords, recognizing that taxes in most of our states are ridiculous, and costs that they pass through are actually costs that they really have. There are, I'm sure, exceptions, but in general, I have found that trying to give a landlord what they want and need makes absolute sense. These are high-risk tenants. These are opportunities for tremendous financial loss. And after COVID, where folks have been having moratoriums on eviction, and once they get somebody in their unit, they're not allowed to have them go out. I mean, I don't blame landlords for 1 minute for their anxieties. It's our job to kind of help them get through that. And so we make a commitment minimally to 1 year. And sometimes I will offer a 2-year lease right off the bat if I know I want to stay in a specific spot, whether one family stays there or not. The longer I have a unit, the longer I have made signed a lease for, the less I'll have to pay for that the next year. Rents are going up so fast that the longer I have something locked in, the better. If by some miracle all refugees, didn't need to keep arriving and I'm stuck with a whole bunch of houses, that's when I turn around to make friends with women's shelters and with the PATH program and with all of the other organizations and units or other organizations that are serving low-income people and people with special needs and with serious and persistent mental health concerns and such. So the other thing that's really nice about our model is landlords don't like to deal with county and state. So if in general, sometimes a landlord will say to me, if I have this family move in, am I going to have to start dealing with the Board of Social Services? And I say, no, because the Board of Social Services will give me the temporary rental assistance if that family qualifies for it. And our social workers will go and work with it at the Board of Social Services and work with the family. And the landlord says, what happens if they're delayed in getting the payment? I said, that's my problem, not yours. You're going to get the rent on the first of the month. So that is the approach we take. And it's allowed us, I have 181 units, rental units currently. I have 900 tenants. It is all on this model. And it's really helped us become a major player in meeting the housing needs. Not everything is affordable, and part of me is okay with that. In the same way that Kendall is speaking about, it's about self-sufficiency and integration. I don't think we do refugees favors to walk into a world where so many of our local neighbors are desperately struggling to get by. And frankly, a lot of them have had less educational opportunities and less potential for self-sufficiency than the refugees who are coming in. That's not true of all refugees, but it's true of a lot of our refugees. So I'm not always looking for affordable. I'm looking for anything. And then trying to help people grow into actually being able to do it. And if they can't, then they can get TRA. And if they can't, then you can come up with cool solutions with people like Tricia, Pastor Tricia, who you can say something like, you can come up with your own voucher system. So if there's a family that is paying $1,800 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment, and they decide they want to be part of the Episcopal special voucher for refugee initiative program, and they subject themselves to meeting with somebody to go over their finances once every 3 months for an update on pay stubs, and you figure out what an appropriate amount is that family should be paying. Maybe they can handle $1,200, but they can't handle $800. So for the next 3 months, when they pay their 12, you meet them with 6, and then you reassess that in 3 months. These are the kinds of creative, like, voucher programs of our own that we can come up with. I do that for a few families already. In some cases, somebody will call me and say, hey, I want to help out a specific family. And I'll say, I got a single mom from El Salvador with 4 kids. She's working under the table because she's not a refugee. She's seeking asylum. She can pay this amount, and this is what the rent is that we're paying. Can you do $500 a month for the next 6 months? Sure, I can. And that's a game changer for a family.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Father Pierre, I see you've joined us. And hopefully we can get you unmuted because we can see you now. Oh, we're so close.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Welcome. Thank you for being part of this. Can you share what you are doing with Haitian Ministry?
So I'm not be able to share with the screen with you because I'm doing this for my phone, but I can just read it for you. It's okay?
Mm-hmm.
Please.
Okay, thank you. Well, so forgive me for my accent because English is my first language. That I speak Creole, French, Spanish, and English. So be patient. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today about my work with the Haitian immigrant community. I am an Episcopal priest who was born and raised in Haiti. So I know very well the problems of Haiti and the problems we Haitian immigrants face when we arrive here in the USA. I know I don't have to tell you about how difficult it is to leave your home country to travel to a land, culture, and society that are different from everything you ever knew. Especially hard when conditions in your country give you no other choice than to leave. And then after you leave home, you find yourself in a country that despises you and treats you with violence and contempt. That's unimaginable and only unbelievable. Except that it does happen to Haitian immigrants when they arrive in USA. Did you know that the Diocese of Haiti is the largest diocese in the Episcopal Church? It has more than 90,000 members. Yet for many of my Haitian brothers and sisters, when they arrive in the United States, the Episcopal Church has never before offered them a spiritual home or any assistance in settling in their adopt home. That's why Father Andy Moore and I asked the Bishop Chips, to start the Haitian Ministry. Before the Haitian Ministry began, many Haitian Episcopal migrants joined Baptist churches when they got to USA because that's where they were welcomed and felt more of a cultural affinity. But when they learned that there is an Episcopal Haitian ministry, that provide worship services in Haitian Creole with Haitian music, they react with joy. They feel a new hope in knowing that the Episcopal Church welcomes them with worship services in their own language, in their own cultural expressions. We began the Haitian ministry last year, which was a very hard year for Haiti. The assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in July destabilized the government. And a few weeks later, a devastating earthquake killed about 2,500 people, injured another 13,000 people, made 650,000 people homeless, and wounded in other ways, destroyed the infrastructure, and caused economic turmoil. 2 days after the earthquake, tropical storm Grace made the misery even worse. As a regional director of Haitian Ministry of the Diocese of New Jersey, immediately after these disasters, I opened communication between several American faith-based and nonprofit organizations and with Episcopal churches in Haiti to support the most urgent earthquake relief efforts. I established contact with 2 Episcopal churches in Haiti so that we could respond in the best way to their needs. I made sure that the donations from churches in the diocese went to the right people in the right places where help was most needed. We raised more than $20,000. Last year, we built a partnership with many organizations and political leaders who were working to help Haitian asylum seekers and immigrants in New Jersey, which has about 60,000 Haitians who mostly live in Essex and Union counties. There are many other things we did last year for the Haitian immigrant community, including partnering with Keene universities, Toys for Tots program, and local Girl Scout group to send toys to children in Haiti. Hosting a new mother party to give baby items to pregnant women and new mothers. Partnering with Father Chesney Denford at Trinity Asbury Park to offer Haitian prayer service to the Haitian community there. Holding a Christmas service at the former Good Shepherd Church in Raleigh, which I hope to reopen for Creole, Haitian, and Spanish language services. Offering English classes, ESL, at St. Elizabeth Episcopal Church in Elizabeth. So far, 17 people have completed the program, and about 40 are currently enrolled in classes. Our classes are held on Monday and Tuesday morning from 10 a.m. until noon, and Thursday and Friday from 10:30 a.m. until 2:30 p.m. And on Monday and Thursday evening from 6 to 8 p.m. We are always looking for volunteer teachers. You don't have to speak another language to be able to help. I also partnered with Father Denford to offer these classes in Asbury Park. I am very proud of my work with Father Andy to provide COVID vaccination and testing clinics for Haitian community in Elizabeth, Pleasantville, and Kendall. Through our membership in the City of Elizabeth response team, we are helping to distribute more than 5,000 COVID home test kits to St. Elizabeth, St. Mark's, Plainfield, and Christchurch, New Brunswick. The emergencies in Haiti and the coronavirus pandemic have left the Haitian immigrant community in very bad shape. But by word of mouth and with walking the street to find them, the Haitian community is beginning to know that we are there for them. One of our goals for this year is to hire staff and find volunteer helps. We can develop a multimedia communications and marketing program. I would welcome any volunteer help in this. We also need help to raise money to help the Haitian community and for evangelical outreach. Haitian immigrants face many obstacles. Like other immigrants, Haitians want very much to fit into America while still holding to some of their own culture. They are often forced to leave New Jersey to go to other states because affordable housing is so hard to find here. They also have 3 other critical obstacles. Jobs offering a living wage are hard to find here. Most of them don't have cars or access to transportation, which makes it hard to keep jobs and to find them. Transportation problems also makes it hard for them to come to church in person. There is not much free legal aid. Help them file documents to stay in the country legally. The Haitian Ministry is working with legal professionals willing to help Haitian migrants get through the process for asylum and not to find lawyers who won't take advantage of them. There is also a growing need to improve Haitian immigrants' computer literacy. We don't really have enough computers for our ESL program and for our students to use. With more computers, we can expand our ESL offering to help our students apply for community college. And we can add a job search component to the program. We also need employment coaches to help immigrants who have temporary work permits find jobs. We are also looking in partnering with financial professionals who can teach financial literacy. Last year, because of the assassination of President Moïse, the earthquake, and the hurricane, thousands of Haitians left the country to seek asylum in neighboring countries. Many of them reached the Texas-Mexico border last September. It was shocking to see the inhuman way Haitian migrants were treated in Del Rio, Texas, by US Border Patrol agents on horseback. I sent out a news release condemning this treatment, and I pointed out that there was a big difference between how Haitian migrants were treated and the way migrants from Afghanistan were treated. I asked Congress to do more to make sure the US has an equitable immigration policy for all people, regardless of their country of origin, the color of their skin, or the way they worship God. Eventually, some of the migrants were permitted to enter the country, but many others were flown back to Haiti. Haitians are only about 6% of the migrants crossing the border with Mexico, but 60% of the people who are flown out of the country are Haitian. Senator Bob Menendez has asked President Biden to make sure there is a racial equity in American immigration policy and to end the anti-Black racism that Haitian migrants face. The senator showed that there is a big difference between the way Haitian immigrants are treated by US and the way they welcome Ukrainians who come here to escape the Russian invasion. I was happy last month when President Biden gave temporary protected status to Haitians already living in the United States. But I joined with Senator Menendez and Senator Cory Booker in urging the president to grant asylum to more Haitians. The Haitian Ministry tries to do what we can to make sure Haitian immigrants have their basic needs met. They want to work, but they often cannot find opportunities. We do what we can to keep them from losing hope. We make them know that they have a welcoming and supporting home in the Episcopal Diocese of New Jersey. They often get to the point where they just don't know what next for them. So I am there to support them and help them face overcome the obstacles and help of all their dignity. We are grateful for the financial assistance provided by the Diocese of New Jersey, the Episcopal Church, and by individual donors through a special connection organized by ECS. This helps us succeed in our mission of outreach and pastoral care to the Haitian community. In ministering to them in my day-to-day activities, I feel the weight of the cross, but I am happy that the grace of God makes it possible for me to provide much needed support. thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you about the Haitian ministry. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Father Pierre. Is email the best way for someone to contact you who would like to support the ministry? Because I'm putting your email address in the chat again.
Yes, yes, no problem. That's fine. Is my name, my first name, my last name, 11@gmail.com.
Excellent. I just put in the chat, and we will put in the share your story as well, websites and email addresses for our presenters so far. Before we turn over to our question and answer period, I want to give a few minutes to introduce herself and to give an overview of the ministry, which she has become executive director of. Welcome, Deacon Tricia Thorne, to this panel.
All right. Well, thanks. It's so nice of you to give me a few minutes. And as others have said, thanks, Marshall, for that plug. I'm the brand new, this is day 5, executive director of Episcopal Community Services, New Jersey, which I think all of you know is a new diocesan initiative to proactively address human needs such as food and shelter and relentlessly work against social and racial injustice. So I just love the way that Reverend Caperdale said that the advocacy piece is so important and that churches have a key role to play in changing those conditions. So I thought that was great. And of course, I love the idea of a housing fund. So we have these 2 prongs of work for ECS, one of which is that we support ongoing ministries of compassion and justice, especially through our grant program, which is twice a year. So the next grant cycle will be announced in July. We're making some tweaks to it, and then it will be due in September. But the application will look much like the previous applications. And of course, if you want to talk about it before you officially see it in July, please let me know. I also want to say that on Saturday, the intention is to have kind of an Immigration 101 event with a person from the state on Saturday. As you know, immigration is a little fraught right now, so it's been a little challenging to get those details lined up, but the intention is to have a briefing on immigration on Saturday morning at 10. So I put the link for the registration in the chat. But yeah, thank you. I know many of the people on this call, and I'm very excited about working with you in this new capacity.
Thank you so much, and welcome and congratulations again. At this point, I want to give another opportunity to open up to questions. We've had great panelists tonight with great presentations. This whole Zoom is being recorded and will be posted later, so we can refer back to it. We can share it with people who were not here because there was so much important information. Are there any questions from those of us gathered right now? As I try to look at all my Zoom windows. That link isn't working. What link would that be?
I tried clicking on Trisha's link and it's not live.
Ah.
Yeah, I can probably dive somewhere else to find the link, but that might take a few minutes. So let me work on that.
And we can definitely include that in the Share Your Story recapping this event. For all of the panelists gathered, I have Episcopal Migration Ministries.org, interfaithrise.org. I have Father Pierre's and Father Moore's email addresses. Are there any other connection points that I am neglecting that should be included? Any final thoughts from any of our panelists or presenters who would... Father Shelley, I see you have a raised hand.
I have another question, if I may, and this goes to all three, knowing pretty well the work that's gone down, except for EMM, although I know Chris McNabb pretty well and have followed him. Can you guys speak a little bit to the aspect of scalability with some of these efforts? Because one of the things that I think can be intimidating, especially Seth, when we're looking at Interfaith Rise, is that I know that you've spent years building the infrastructure to create this support. One of the things that we're tasked with is really trying to help local churches begin to resource and network with each other. Can we talk a little bit about scalability, just to give some thoughts and reassurances as we look into that? And particularly as we look towards migration presentation from ECS, this is something that's going to be with us for a while now.
I would have to know more about what you're trying to scale in order to answer that.
I think, yeah, I know it's, I think I'll frame it and let you build on this. One of the things I appreciate about having worked with you for years, Seth, is that you say, yes, now how?
Mhm.
And I think that's, you tend to present strong, like we do this, we do this, we do this, it stacks up quickly. But I've watched you in rooms with people, and one of the things when they propose an idea, you say, yes, now how, which is a slightly different tack, because it reflects back and says, how do we do that? And then you're able to orient resources to that end. In other words,
Yeah.
the organization can pivot. That's one of those things. I think maybe that's a better way to lead you into the question.
Yeah, that's great. This will be my last comment, and then I have to sign off because it's Father's Day and my kids have dinner ready for me. So, so I'll answer that question. My answer to that would be the key is taking a B. Like I think a lot of church people and maybe just educated people generally are afraid to jump into things because they want to know everything about everything and be ready to do it perfect before they start, which means they never do it. It's very, very hard to just jump in. So I think we have plenty of biblical stories about stepping out on the water, et cetera. And they are the key ones to what this kind of work is. None of us will know exactly how to do it. We won't do it perfect. We'll fall on our face. We'll make a lot of mistakes, but we know about saying sorry. We know about trying again. We know about building community and coalition. We know about listening for the Spirit. We have all these tools in our sort of faith toolbox that can help us get over what we don't know and grow into A+ work. And the fastest to the table are the ones that get the resources, not the ones that really know what they're doing. So we've benefited time and time again from seeing a problem, saying, yep, and we'll do it, and jumping into it. And then before you know it, people are like, oh, they know they're doing something. So doing something is the best way to generate interest in resources. And then once you're doing it, you get better. Apprenticeship, discipleship, discipleship, maybe, sometimes discipleship training programs or something. It's like there's some goal you got to reach, but I would say that disciples were disciples from the first day they started being a disciple. You are a disciple by virtue of journeying. So that's probably a good mentality shift for taking on some of these bigger things.
Pastor Caperdale, I know you have to run. Thank you so much for being with us, and we will continue to share your contact information.
All right.
Happy
God bless
Father's
you all.
Day.
Thank you. Yep. Bye.
Sally
Yes.
Maurer has her hand up.
I think one of the reasons that we as a group felt this would be important would be for us to equip churches with ideas for things to do. And I remember last August when I was completely overwhelmed with information, kind of go down the rabbit hole and not find a way back out for several days. It just kept getting bigger and bigger instead of more and more refined. And I kind of focused in on a particular need that I heard through a priest's wife in the diocese, and that was collecting diapers and wipes for the Afghan refugees. And so I started there. And the next thing then I got hooked up and found Interfaith Rise and found the ability to go back to my churches and say, could we collect household goods? And by the time that was done, Interfaith Rise had to send a box truck for all the stuff that we collected from 3 different Episcopal churches. And it kind of has mushroomed from there and evolved. I think that in my way of thinking, that's kind of where when you're talking to your church, they need it. This is great and good foundational information, but I think they also want to know what is needed, what can we do? And it could be the very important housing project, or it could be working with a cooperative to get cars for people or bikes for people, but it could also be as simple as running a baby wipe drive. And I think that's important to say.
Thank you so much. Kendall, I want to give you the final word, and it's a big one. It's a big question. I know many of us in congregations will reluctantly admit that we have heard from people before, we have such great need in this country. Why should we be thinking about refugees? Why should we focus our attention, our resources, our time on this? Can you sum that up, especially for people of faith, what that drive is?
Sure, and I might not do it eloquently, but I do have talking points that I share with folks in the church if they want them as ways to know how to broach that issue. But I mean, we always lead with it's not an either or, it's a both and. I believe that you can help the people in your local community, you know, whether it's homeless vets or it's, you know, folks who are being evicted from their house, or they don't have food. You can give to those things and also support folks who have been displaced, who don't have any other option, who are in desperate need of safety and security and welcome. And, you know, the way that we lean into it is that that's our biblical call. So it's not a question of, am I helping my neighbor, or am I, you know, because the way that we look at it is my neighbor is next door and my neighbor's across the world. And I want to honor the dignity of both of those people. And I think that we can do that. And I think there are tangible ways to get involved in this that aren't always a heavy lift, because some groups don't have the money or the people power or the resources. But at the most basic level, the most effective thing, honestly, is advocacy and contacting your members of Congress. It's like actually making policy changes. And so at the end of the day, that's a very easy lift. That's an email or a phone call, but it makes a huge difference. So I think there are many inroads to be engaged in this work, but I think that the most important thing is that these people are our neighbors, and I can't think of anything else you should do but offer welcome. And so it's sort of a non-starter when people ask that question and want to pit them against each other. And we see it with, you know, people want to pit refugees against asylum seekers, and then they want to pit from where they're from, you know, I mean, just like the father had spoken about. I mean, we see that people have come out of the woodworks wanting to help Ukrainians, but where have these people been all these years when we've been resettling all these individuals who also need support? So it's just really making it clear that all of these people are our neighbors. They all need our help, and it's not about picking and choosing.
I think you said it well. Thank you for that answer. Thank you to all of our panelists for being part of this tonight. For Kendall Martin, for Seth Caperdale, and for Father Robin Pierre, on behalf of Father Andy Moore as well. I want to thank everyone on the Afghan-Ukraine Task Force. We've had many meetings to put this together, so I thank them all greatly. And I'm going to ask our fearless convener and chair, Mother Ellen Rutherford, to send us off in prayer.
Oh, if you would pray with me, please. God, no one is a stranger to you and is ever far from your loving care. In your kindness, refugees and asylum seekers, those separated from their loved ones, those who are lost, and those who have exiled their homes. Bring them safely to the place where they long to be, and help us always to show your kindness to strangers and those in need. Strength, guide assistance to those seeking refuge, guide us to support ministries, and we ask this through Christ our Lord, who too was a refugee and migrant who traveled to another land, searching for a home. Amen.
Amen. Again, thank you to everyone who participated. This video will live online on the diocesan website. Please share this video broadly, and please contact these organizations if you'd like to get involved. Go in peace.